can you please explain gravity for me? Like, I figured that's probably one of the hangups that you have. I guess I should first ask, is gravity one of your hangups? And if so, can you explain why things fall without gravity?
First of all, is there any proof, scientific proof of gravity?
Yes, we have the scientific theory of gravity or gravitational force, and then there's also the law of gravity that mathematically describes the force.
Okay, how about a scientific evidence proving it?
Well, yeah, there's multiple bits of scientific evidence. I mean, obviously, there's the Cavendish experiment, which you're gonna not
Cavendish
like,
is not an experiment.
huh?
Cavendish is not an experiment.
Cavendish is an experiment, and
It's
it
not a
definitely
it's
does
not a
prove that
scientific
matter
experiment.
attracts
It's not a
matter.
scientific experiment. It doesn't have proper considerations for independent, dependent variables, let alone the fact that Cavendish stood, how many meters away he stood from the little shack with the balls? And he looked at the balls through a telescope because he thought that his body, the gravitational mass of his body was going to maybe hinder the balls in his shed. So he looked at it through a telescope. And yet they tell us that the tides on Earth are caused by the moon's gravity, but the moon is not going to maybe mess with Cavendish's balls in his shed, but he had to keep his little body far away. I mean, Cavendish is embarrassing, dude.
Okay, so you're basically shitting on Cavendish for isolating variables and whatnot, and
No,
trying to
no,
have a good
no.
experiment, but then you're also shitting on him for not isolating variables.
I did not say that that the problem with Cavendish was that he isolated variables. He
No, 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 no,
failed to
no. You
do
said
it.
the
He
problem is he
failed to
didn't
do it
isolate
according to
variables.
the scientific method properly.
No, you say that he didn't isolate variables, and so you say that that's a problem with it, but then you shit on him for isolating a variable.
Um, the moon affects the tides, but it won't affect his balls in a shed.
The moon does affect the tides. That's you're comparing two things of different
No,
sizes
I'm
there.
not. He moved his body away because he was afraid that his body would affect the
Do you
experiment, the
think Cavendish
gravitational
is as
mass,
big as the
but he
moon?
made no considerations for the moon's gravitational mass.
Do you think Cavendish is as big as the moon?
That's not the point. That's actually wait a
No,
minute.
that's
That
actually
is
the
my point.
point.
That is my point. The Earth, the moon is going to have a massive effect. If it's affecting tides, why won't it disrupt his little balls in a shed experiment that he had to stand 300 meters away from because he was afraid he was going to mess with it? It's a joke.
Okay, do you know why he would have done that?
He would have done it because he thought that it was going to inhibit the experiment. Meanwhile, the moon is probably affecting it the way it affects the tides. So it's a joke.
So, can you explain the law of gravity for me?
The law of gravity. Um, I don't care within your paradigm. There's no proof that gravity exists.
Well, don't you kind of have to know my paradigm in order to suggest that my paradigm doesn't explain shit?
Well, I don't care about your law versus like you mentioned law versus mathematical proof of gravity and all this stuff. I want you straight up hardcore scientific method 101. Prove that gravity exists. And there's come on, man. You never see we don't at best there's a downward force, which obviously there's a lot of dispute, and I'm not even sure what side of the fence I sit on this topic, but I believe that hey, there's probably a downward force. Why not? There's a downward force. Now, there isn't a force to center of mass like the globe model requires. A lot of flat earthers will say it's just buoyancy and density. I tend to think, you know what? There's probably buoyancy, density, and there's probably a downward force. Why the hell not? There's a downward force all across this potential flat Earth. Because again, I'm just a globe skeptic, not a flat earther.
Okay, can you explain the formula for the buoyant force?
Do you know Einstein's theory of relativity? But do you know the actual equations behind it?
Well, I mean, no, but I'm also not trying to use that in order to say
Okay,
that Einstein
cool.
was wrong or anything like
Cool.
that.
Just want to
I
make
don't
sure
have
it's
to
not.
know
I
that.
gotcha.
These are
Okay.
basic things. Like, I'm not bringing up special relativity or general relativity or anything like that. Like, you don't have to know those things in order to, like, prove that gravity is an actual thing. So
Right.
the
And my point is just that you don't have to know the equations to understand the principles at work in something. So if you
well,
want
no,
to
I mean,
ask me what the
you do
formula,
have
if
to
you want
know
to
the
ask me what the
equations in
formula
order to
is,
know the
go ahead, ask me
forces
the formula.
that are at
You want
effect.
to ask me the formula, go ahead, ask me. Go for it.
Okay, so I mean, you realize that like the buoyant force requires gravity, or this dropity, as as you put it, to exist. Like, because the buoyant force requires some force like pulling down on an object. Like, objects are attracted to each other. That's what Cavendish proved. And since objects are attracted to each other, we can calculate those exactly. Now, in order to suggest that reality doesn't work the way that we've known it to, you need to come up with some kind of mathematical formula that rivals the law of gravity to explain that attraction, that force between a couple of things. And so everything that has matter in the universe attracts to other matter. And we can measure this and exactly calculate how much force it is. But you're throwing that all out the window. And that's why you don't need to bring Einstein into this or anything
Are you
like
done, dude?
that.
I thought you were.
These
Are
are
you done yet?
basic concepts.
Are you done yet?
Sure.
Okay. Um, yeah, I say, why can't there just be a downward force? We never experience things pulling to center of mass. You can go anywhere on the so-called globe Earth. You can travel. You'll never see curvature, by the way. You'll never see it. I mean, Neil deGrasse Tyson says you can't see from 128,000 feet altitude, let alone 35,000 feet from your average commercial airliner. You'll never see curvature. You'll never feel it. You can travel all around the so-called globe. You'll never feel it. And what you call gravity, I just call a universal downward force.
The
That's all
theory
it
of
is.
dropity.
Sure, whatever you want. But I sure as hell have never experienced things pulling to the center of mass.
You experience something pulling to the center of mass every single day.
Center of mass is different than down, bro.
Center of mass is different than down. That's why Australians don't hang upside down on a ball.
Well, the direction of gravity, the direction of the drop, the direction of the pull changes directions for people in Australia compared to people in North America, for example.
Well, yeah,
I
that's
don't
explained by
experience
gravity.
I don't experience down ever changing direction. I could get on a 12-hour flight, fly halfway around the so-called globe, and down is always under my feet. I could, I could go 500 miles an hour on an airplane. I could have the flight attendant could roll on out. She could pour me a beverage, and I could sip the beverage, and I won't even spill a drop as I'm going around the curve, supposedly. Down is all we ever experience. You're telling me that down changes directions. I'm saying all I ever experience is down.
Do you know why down changes direction?
Duh. Because gravity,
So,
according to your model, pulls to the center of mass.
right, gravity pulls the center of mass. So, if you're on a globe and you go around the globe and gravity is pulling to the center of mass, where is down constantly?
Well, on your model, it changes direction, bro.
Well, no, it doesn't necessarily change direction because it's always right beneath your feet because down is
It
always
changes
pointing towards the
direction,
center
bro.
of
It
gravity,
changes direction. Don't
the
deny
center
changing
of the
direction.
earth.
It's gonna look really bad for you, dude. Don't deny that. It changes direction, bro.
Well, no, no, it does not change direction. It always pulls like when you say that gravity pulls to the center of mass, then gravity is not changing direction.
Okay, I'll put it to you like this. Let's say you have somebody standing in North America, right? They drop an apple out of their hand and it starts heading in a direction. And let's say that that apple let's just say it heads in that direction for infinity. Just it keeps going forever. Then you have somebody on the other side of the globe in Australia. They drop an apple. And imagine that that apple keeps moving in that down direction to the center of Earth. It keeps going. Those are two different directions.
No, they're not.
All right, how about this?
What is okay? Listen, what is the direction that you just described?
Let me ask this question:
Describe that direction for me real quick.
People in Australia, are their heads? If somebody in Australia points up and somebody in North America points up, are they pointing in the same direction?
No, because we're on a globe, and they're pointing the direction of up. Are you talking about whether they would be pointing like at the same constellations or something like that? Then no, they wouldn't be. They're pointing in the relative direction of up, which is different for every person on the Earth. Up, down, left, right, those are relative.
Yes, and that was my point with the apple as well. Down is a different direction depending on what side of the globe you're on. Like, yes, you can say that down is technically towards the center of the Earth. Nobody's denying that. But the direction of things falling are changing direction, physical actual direction. The direction of the fall is different. The orientation is different.
You're looking at it from a reference frame that's outside of the globe Earth and specifically in that three-dimensional plane where that vector is pointing. But within the reference frame of the person on the globe, the vector of that direction will always be pointing like down towards the center of mass of the Earth. Right. So down. It's not changing direction. It's still pointing towards the center of mass, which is the direction.
Yeah, it's obvious. I mean, this is so elementary and obvious that, I mean, I don't know how anybody, I mean, other than a brainwashed cult member could not see right through it. And I'm not saying you, I'm just saying anybody who doesn't get it, who's watching, I mean, it should be very obvious. I mean, I don't know how else to explain it. You know, you know, it seems like you're defining direction strictly by center of mass. And that's not what I'm talking about. My point is simply, no matter where I go on Earth, at any point in my life, even if I get on a plane, and according to Neil deGrasse Tyson, you can't see curvature on a plane from 35,000 feet. Red Bull jump guy couldn't even see it. But I'm sure there were a bunch of science dorks who were like, yeah, look, you see the curve from space, Red Bull jump. And then, no, apparently you can't see from that high, according to Neil deGrasse Tyson. I can get on a plane, I can fly around the so-called globe, but the sense of where down is, which will change its direction depending on what side of the globe you're on, I never feel that. All I ever feel is down. I never see curve. I never feel like I'm going around a curve. All I feel is down, 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 down. That's it.
Okay, well, still, you know, down's relative, and I do like how you still haven't explained like the exact mechanism or anything like that for this dropity. How would you like if I punched a wall? How would you like measure the force of that? Because I mean, we have to know these things in order for a lot of things to work in this reality. Calculating the force of something, the static forces of a single system. Me being an engineer, I had to learn all of that shit while I was going through college. So I'm kind of curious, how exactly do you calculate that force in your world? Because to me, you wouldn't be able to calculate it.
Are you talking about punching a wall? Or are you talking about like what you're calling dropity?
I mean, it's the same thing. The downward force, gravity, that's a force, just like my hand hitting the wall, my palm smacking into my face.
Yeah, obviously. Well, you know what? If everywhere on Earth it's 9.8 meters squared? Is that the rate of fall according to gravity?
Yes.
Right. And if that is experientially, scientifically proven to be true at any point on the globe, it wouldn't surprise me if it varies in some places. Does it vary?
Yes, it does vary.
Yeah, I figured it would. Um, then the way I see it, here's my thing. My thing is why, see, I don't deny that things drop, duh, obviously. I don't deny that there's a 9.8 meters per second, it's a square drop. I don't deny that. I mean, you'd have to be insane to deny that things fall and it's predictable and it's testable and it's repeatable. Where I have a difference with you and the Globers in general is that you guys aren't just saying it's falling, you're saying it's being pulled to the center of mass. So the way I see it, the numbers and the math that you guys use to describe the rate at which things fall could generally probably simply be applied to this universal downward thing that we can feel and we can experience no matter where we are on the earth. And by the way, I mean, you'll never see curvature as you travel across the earth. I mean, you can't see from 35,000 feet. So you can go anywhere on earth and you can test that things fall to your feet. But I don't see where curvature gets added into the equation there.
So what exactly is the connection between curvature and dropity?
Well, for you guys, things are being pulled to a center of mass.
Right.
And I say, well, if it turns out we don't live on a globe, then the phenomenon of things dropping could just be a universal downward force. Why not? If there's a gravity force that's pulling things to center of mass, why can't there be a downward force? I mean, here's a question. In video games, when they program video games, Elon Musk, he's a big fan of simulation theory. He says we might be living in a simulation theory. The average video game is made on a flat map. That the world, play like Skyrim or something, it's a flat map. And I mean, I don't know shit about programming, but are they using gravity, things pulling to the center of mass, as the formula to create the in-game physics of things falling down on a flat map? Or are they just using some kind of universal map-wide downward force? Not to center of mass, just down. So I just say, why do we have to introduce a ball, a globe, pulling to the center of mass? Why can't we just have a flat plane with a universal downward force, and that's it? And yeah.
Okay. First of all, physics engines do use gravity in their calculations. I mean, in order to get a good model, in order to, I guess, please people that are playing games, you would have to consider gravity and all of that, or this dropity that you're talking about there.
On a flat map video game, they're using gravity. On a flat map, they're using gravity.
I'm saying that in video games and physics engines, they definitely do use gravity, and they take gravity into consideration when playing these games or when programming these games. Now, if you will, you talk for like 5 minutes. Can I please talk?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So in your whole diatribe here, you seem to think that this dropity or this downward force only acts on specific objects, mainly just objects, I guess, that are on the surface of the earth and not like the ground or anything below it. So, I mean, do you think that like dropity only happens above the surface? Or do you think it doesn't affect like the ground?
Yeah, probably, yeah. Why not? Yeah, of course.
Okay, so extrapolating from that, if you have why do you, if you have such a wide, like a huge flat earth, if everything is pulling down, why is it that like it hasn't crumbled off? Like, why don't the edges crumble off? Why don't things crumble into, well, I would say a sphere, but you deny that it's being pulled to the center of mass. So exactly what is this theory of dropity doing? What is the exact theory? Just shit falls down? Is that all that is? Or do you have some kind of actual formalized theory that explains why it falls down? Why don't things fall to the left or the right? Why don't they fall up? Like, what is making things fall down? On the theory of gravity, we have an explanation because mass attracts mass. We have this formula that can calculate the force of attraction between two objects. And because the Earth is so massive, the force of gravity on any one person pulls it to the center of the Earth and keeps them on the Earth. That's what allows us to stay here and not fall off the Earth. And it also allows us to keep an atmosphere. So, I mean, you have to understand that you're being this globe skeptic over there, but at the same time, you're not actually giving me good explanations as to why these things happen. Whereas my model, the existing consensus, can fully explain why these things happen.
No one's intimidated by your appeal to consensus.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. What?
No one's intimidated by your appeal to consensus.
Okay, I didn't only appeal to consensus. I explained why the theory of gravity.
I know, but you did it again. I just wanted to hit that little point. Okay, so let me go through all the stuff you said because you went on a big diatribe there. Okay, God, where do I even start? I mean, what do you want from me? You want a mathematical formula to explain the universal downward force, which is the only thing we ever can experience and observe?
Well, I mean, a mathematical formula would be great. I doubt that you have one, but just an explanation as to why things are compelled to fall down rather than to the left, to the right, or up, or any
well,
of
I
those
already
other ways.
told you that maybe it's just because that's the way the universe is, and you might be like, well, how does that work? Well, okay, if I ask you how does gravity work, and you're going to tell me, oh, everything pulls the center of mass. And then I can ask you again, okay, well, how does that work? So I will ask you, how does that work?
Well, I mean, that's where special relativity comes in because mass displaces space-time and it causes that space-time to warp and be pulled towards the larger like warps in space-time. Like that's one way to think of it. Now,
okay.
If you're thinking
and why does that happen?
Because matter displaces space-time. Space and time are linked.
Right, and why is it that warping space-time pulls things down? Why? What is it in the properties of space and time that has that feature built into it?
Okay, so for one thing, it doesn't just pull things down; it pulls things towards the center of gravity, like the center of mass.
Yeah,
So. Have you ever seen like those little little attractions, like you go to a mall or some kind of amusement park or something like that? You put the quarter at the very top of it, you drop it, and it goes around the sides until it drops into the bucket.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, it kind of works on a similar principle to that. Like, as you get closer to this center of mass, you're compelled, like you're pulled towards it because that's just how it works. I don't know how else to explain it to you. I mean, it's not like it's just like I'm sorry, I don't know how else to explain it. Like I don't know how to explain it to like a 5-year-old.
Here's the point I was trying to make. I didn't even really need an answer from you because the reason I kept asking you that question was because eventually I can ask you indefinitely, well, what causes gravity to do what it does? And then what causes space-time to do what it does? And then if you give me an answer to that, I'd be like, well, what causes that to do what it does? My point is that you're asking me for an explanation of how everything has a downward force. And I just say, that's it. It just has it. You don't have to go any deeper. Just like, again,
no, but you do.
I'm going to go to the video game example with the video game. You tell me they have gravity in video games, but in my understanding, gravity pulls to the center of mass. So I don't understand how you could have a flat map in a video game that's abiding by a curved globular pull to the center of mass